Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and today it's time to go through my best books of 2024. I have a top 10 along with one honorable mention that I just have to talk to you guys about, and so we're gonna do 11 books in this video, which I know is a weird number, but it is what it is. I'm going to go through the synopsis of each book with you, or if it's a series, I will tell you what the first book is about or the general premise of the series, and then talk about what I love about these books. If you have any questions about these books, please let me know in the comments down below. And also don't forget to let me know your best book of 2024. The honorable mention is Night Film. This was a 4.75, and actually thinking about it, all the other books on this list are a 5-star. So I won't be mentioning any other ratings other than this one. And this was almost just barely missed the mark. I did this on my Read Until I Get a 5-Star series, which I'll link in the description and in the cards if you guys are interested in more of my thoughts. But this is a horror mystery book, and it's quite hefty, even though it is 600 pages, but like, it doesn't look like 600 pages. At least I don't think it looks like 600 pages, but there's a lot of mixed media in here, which is like they use better quality on the pages because of that. Our main character here is an investigative journalist, and he in the past has investigated a horror director of film because this particular director has a little bit of a cult following. The showings of his movies that he has directed are always done in secret, kind of black market, and they cover some pretty gruesome topics. Well, this director, his daughter has died at the very beginning of the story, and you are trying to figure out whether or not this is a suicide, which is what the police want to rule it, or if there's more to the story. And so this investigative journalist, because he has done investigations on the family before, he takes the investigation under his wing and tries to figure out whether or not this girl was murdered. And there are so many twists and turns in this. And I love the way the mixed media is done and how it adds to the storyline, and you just kind of feel like you're getting deeper and deeper and deeper into trouble with the characters, because you not only follow the investigative journalist, but he ends up having two almost sidekicks that are a little bit of comedic relief when you need them, and he doesn't really want them, but they come along for the ride anyway. And it was just such a good time. And the ending, I know, is going to be controversial and polarizing for people, but I absolutely loved it. My number 10 is Timeless by Gail Carriger. This is a series that I really want to own. I just don't yet. And because there are 5 books in the series, I have been kind of dragging my feet since I have already read them, but I would eventually like to have these in my library. This is the Parasol Protectorate, and this is the last book in that series. The Parasol Protectorate starts with Soulless, and with Soulless you have a character whose name is Alexia Tirabati, and she is just fabulous. It is a Victorian era fantasy, so it's an urban fantasy, but you also have vampires and ghosts and werewolves that are in this society, and they live amongst humans. Humans know that they're there. There are specific laws that give these beings rights and can kind of keep control over them to a certain extent to make sure that the human society is safe. And yeah, you get to be with Alexia, who is a woman in this society who is not married. I think she's 26 at the start of the series, if I remember correctly, but she's considered an old maid. And she is a preternatural, which means if she touches any of these supernatural beings, they lose their supernaturalness. So if she touches a vampire, they turn back into a human. If she touches a werewolf, same thing happens. If she touches a ghost, they get exorcised. So she is, in the world of supernaturals, kind of a pariah, and she's also a pariah in the human world. So she's kind of stuck in the middle. She's so sassy and clever. I just love her. And you also follow her trying to investigate a murder that she gets, I won't say too much, but she, at the very beginning, she gets involved in the death of a vampire, and you have to figure out how and why this happened. And so you follow her investigating, or her helping the police department. I love the series, and I think more people need to read it. Number 9 is Captain's Fury. This is book 4 in the Codex Alera series by Jim Butcher. And every one of these books I really enjoyed, but I've rated them all 4 stars with the exception of this book. And I think it's because I've gotten to know them enough, and there were some really pivotal things that were found out about the characters in this particular storyline that were really meaningful and heartfelt. And so yeah, I just fell in love with this. I mean, I already enjoyed the characters, but this just made it even better. The first book in the series is called The Furies of Cauldron. The Furies of the Cauldron, I think. I'll put a picture on the screen so you guys know where it starts if you want to give the series a try. But in this, you follow a whole bunch of characters, but some of the main ones, the main character is Tavi, who is a shepherd boy in town that is kind of on the outskirts of civilization, kind of, you know, in the boondocks, I guess, would be a way to describe it. But he does not have any powers. He does not know how to communicate or talk to furies, which are elementals, essentially. In a world full of people who can do this, maybe not to really great extents, but everyone has some form of magic. And so he is ostracized in his own way because he doesn't blend in and he doesn't have this power. And then you also follow a woman who is in the midst of some kingdom politics and ends up being betrayed. And you get to follow her with the ramifications of that. And that is kind of the big thing with the Codex Alera series, is it is a massive kingdom where you have an aging emperor who has no heir, and there are people in the kingdom who are trying to vie for his position, and it causes fractures within their own community, but then there's also wars going outside in the kingdoms. And all of this, you have elementals as well that people have, and this kingdom does have its own elemental army where you have people who are very good at dealing with the Furies that are working for the kingdom, and then you have some that are working against. So yeah, it's a lot of fun, but I definitely think the defining point of this series are the characters and the character arcs and how they grow throughout the series. Number 8 is Strange Beasts. I've talked about this in a recent video, but I just have to shout it out again because I absolutely love this. This is a Sherlockian mystery that involves the daughter of Moriarty and a woman who is involved in the events surrounding Dracula. And there are some gruesome murders that are happening in Paris, and they go and investigate and have to figure out who is committing these murders. I loved this. I thought it was so fun. The mix of the monsters and kind of the gothic nature of Dracula with the kind of intellectual nature of Sherlock Holmes, I think is a perfect pairing. And these two ladies definitely kick some butt throughout the storyline, and I just found it very fun. Number 7 is The Crown Tower. This is a companion series to the Rhaenyra Revelations, which is one of my favorite series from last year. This is the Rhaenyra Chronicles, which is the origin story of characters from the Rhaenyra Revelations. But because it is the first in a series, I can actually tell you what is in this book. So within the Rhaenyra Revelations, if you have read that series, you follow two main characters, Royce and Hadrian, who are a kind of a band or a duo that go out and do contract jobs together. They've been working together for a really long time, and they get into a whole bunch of kingdom politics that they don't really want to be in that series. And this is their origin story. So you have two men who absolutely hate each other at the start of this book, don't trust each other one lick, don't want anything to do with each other, but end up having to work together because of some circumstances that come up. And they realize slowly throughout this story and then this series as a whole, because I've read the first 2 books in the series, they learn very slowly that they can rely on one another, and that, you know, they have like a little found brotherhood with each other, even though they're not family. And that's the part that I find absolutely amazing about the Rhaenyra Chronicles and the Rhaenyra Revelations from last year, is the brotherhood that is in this. There are also side characters and found family elements throughout the universe or world that is created in these storylines. So I don't just want to say that it's only about these two men, but they are definitely the shining stars in the story. And I have I'm a sucker for like rough and gruff men who have soft spot for each other, who don't like to speak that they have a soft spot, but because of certain actions that they love each other and care for each other. And yeah, that's my favorite part about this. The number 6 spot is actually a new addition. I just added it to my list today because I just finished it. And that is City of Blades. I did not expect this to be in my favorites of the year list. I was fully expecting to like it and enjoy it. I liked the first book, and I like Robert Jackson Bennett, but this book took me for a ride, and it follows one of my absolutely favorite characters from City of Stairs, which is the first book in this series. So I'm not going to tell you who that character is because it might spoil some of the events of the first book, but I just had a really fun time with that. The entire storyline, both City of Stairs, the first book, and City of Blades, they are set in a kingdom that has 3 different countries or factions that are all kind of vying for power. And there is a huge history surrounding these countries and which ones have conquered, which ones win, and because of why. One of them in particular in City of Stairs was originally known as the City of Gods because there were all these divinities that had these magical powers and would perform miracles and allow normal people to perform miracles with their name. And that city originally had a lot of power, but when all of the divinities died, they lost power, and some of these other kingdoms came in and claimed their country for their own. And so in both of the storylines, though, you are following someone who has gone missing or been murdered, and you're following an investigation into that with all of these political dynamics and with the divinities at play as well. With this one, we are dealing specifically with a divinity that was tied to death, and the city or kingdom that she was originally from, and someone goes missing from a government office, and they send someone in to try and figure out what's going on and if there's anything to worry about. I freaking loved this. The fact that we're dealing with a god of death is also really interesting, and where this author went with that was, chef's kiss. Like, it was absolutely fantastic. And because it followed one of my favorite characters from the first storyline, I think I loved it even more. So I think there's a trend with some of my favorite books of the year this year that a lot of them are seconds, thirds, fourths in series. And a lot of it is the character work that the authors do throughout the series that eventually make me eat, sleep, and breathe these characters. And I bleed for them when they bleed. I cry for them when they cry. I freaking love it. Number 5 on my list is Service Model. This is a new read for me. I just read this in December. This is also a pattern for me. A lot of my 5-star books usually come in the end of the year, which is very strange. I don't know why that is, but I am very happy that I read this because I did not intend to read this in 2024. So this was a buddy read with Leandra and I. And in this, you follow a service model, a valet, and a robotic valet, I should say. He is in a world where people have begun to rely on AI and robots to do the obsolete tasks that we don't really want to do. And he is a valet for this mansion. And I think within the first chapter, you realize that he's murdered his master. And you don't know why. He doesn't know why. He doesn't understand. But now his goal is to find a job as a valet because he obviously is no longer employed at the house that he was in. And you go on a journey for him trying to do that. And you journey through the world and see the world through his eyes, which I don't think I want to say any more than that about the storyline because I think it's really fun to find it out through him. That was one of my favorite things about this story is it's told from his name originally is Charles. His name evolves throughout the storyline, but I won't spoil that either as far as what his names end up being. But so Charles, you get to see the world through his eyes and it's all in his perspective. So simple mundane tasks at the very beginning of the storyline are told in the thought process. And so we might, if we're doing laundry, consider it kind of a burden and something that we have to do. It's necessary, but you know, it takes up time or whatever. He's just checking tasks off of his list. And so it's very clinical and very cold, but you start to see him have like these contradictory messages come up and him having to deal with that. And I definitely think that throughout the story, I don't know if it was because of what I was seeing through his eyes, and as a human, I started to have feelings and sadness and happiness and love for what he was going through, or if it was actually he was evolving. It's very, very well written. The fact that I can't figure out if it was just me as a human having empathy because I'm capable of that, or if it was actually his character growing in his humanity throughout the storyline. I mean, it's fantastic, and I want to own it for my collection. This will be one of the first purchases that I have in 2025. Number 4, I talked about this in my series video that I just recently did. This is the Fragile Threads of Power, which is a companion series to the Darker Shades series by V.E. Schwab. And I freaking love this book. We are dealing with some of the same characters with Darker Shades, and I won't tell you who because of spoilers, but the main person that I loved in this was not originally in the first trilogy. And so this one, unlike some of the other series on this, I did have some characters to lean back on because I had some familiarity, but the main character, the main reason I loved this book wasn't really, I didn't have anything to build off of from the previous books. So I will tell you about that. There is a main character in this who starts out as a fixer of magical items. So she works kind of in like a pawn shop where people can bring stuff in, not really a pawn shop, but like maybe a mechanic's shop, but for magical items. So people can bring in things and she can fix them. Well, people think that she's fixing things in normal ways that, you know, most people can, but really she can see these intricate threads of power. And because of the fact that she can see them, she can mess with them and interact with them in ways they're not normal. And there is magic in the world. People know there are magical items, obviously, but her particular skill is something that's very rare. And because she has this ability, she's always tried to hide, but she ends up not hiding very well or well enough to not get pulled into some larger kingdom politics. And you get to follow her and, as I said, some other characters from the original series to try and figure out what's best, is what I'll say. So I really enjoyed this. I thought it was very creative. The way that it also connects back to and has like some Easter eggs in some of the past storyline is also fantastic. So yes, I will be continuing on. As soon as a new one comes out, I will continue this series. Number 3 is also a book I talked about in that series list, and that is The Grief of Stones. I'm not going to shut up about this series. I want people, if you have read The Goblin Emperor, you need to go and read these novellas. If you have not read The Goblin Emperor, you need to go read that, and then you need to go read these novellas. Although you could technically read these without reading The Goblin Emperor, I just would recommend reading that first. But both of these follow our character, Thara Kelleher, who is a witness for the dead. So The Witness for the Dead is the first book in this series, and you continue following his character in The Grief of Stones. And since he is a witness for the dead, he can talk to the dead and give them kind of their last rites and uphold some of the people's wishes after they have passed. This also lets him be involved in some investigations too. If someone is murdered, he can talk to the person and witness what they went through, which is horrifying, but also very helpful in a murder investigation. And so you get to follow him within this kingdom. And the part I found absolutely lovely about this series is the little tiny things. You do have a through line mystery. Well, not a through line. You have like a separate mystery, I guess, in both books. You have like a murder that you're following. But all of the little tiny investigations that he does, or the little tiny things he does to help the community and help people grieve, is just so heartwarming and wholesome. I mean, I was so happy and elated after I read this book, and also sad and heartbroken because of one of the things that happens at the end. I can't wait to continue the series next year. It's absolutely fantastic. I know for some of you who are watching, you probably know what my top 2 books are, and you're probably wondering what's the order she's going to put these in, because I was wondering that too until this month. My number 2 spot is one that you guys have definitely heard me talk about today, or not today, this year, and I know that a lot of you have picked it up on my recommendation, and I thank you for that, because I do think it deserves it. That's The Book of Doors. I read this for that one of the Read Until I Get a 5-Star vlogs as well, so I'll link that if you guys are interested in deeper thoughts that I have. But this book is just absolutely phenomenal, and I will continue to sing its praises. It's such a vibey book. If you are a fan of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, you will probably enjoy this storyline. But you follow a main character whose name is Cassie. Yeah, Cassie. And Cassie works at a bookshop, and within the very first couple of chapters, she is having a conversation with an older man who is a common patron. He is in their shop a lot. And they're having a conversation about traveling the world and just enjoying life. And she walks away to go and put some books in the back, and she comes back and he has passed away in her shop, and he has left a gift for her, which is called The Book of Doors. And she finds out that with this book, she can go through any door in the world, travel the world. And with that, though, comes some nefarious people who might want the book for themselves. And so she has to navigate that as well. It also has a grief storyline in it that is beautifully written, and the traveler in me was also just smitten with her stories and her thoughts on traveling the world and seeing things. And that happens at the very beginning of the storyline, but I was just head over heels for this book. I bought it after, I think, 10% of reading it. So I was enamored, and I hope that for those of you who did pick it up on my recommendation, I hope you guys enjoyed it. That means that my last spot, you guys can probably guess, is Wind and Truth. I was debating when I was reading this. I kept going back and forth on which one would end up in the number 1 spot. Was it going to be Book of Doors? Was it going to be the Wind and Truth? And I knew that Wind and Doors had a huge disadvantage because of how massive the Stormlight Archive is. But I also can see that being a disadvantage for Wind and Truth, because there's so many different pathways that story could have taken that might not have won my heart. And this absolutely did. Like, there was no doubt in my mind. As soon as I finished it, I was like, this is my best book of the year. There's no question. I actually, and I'm not committing to this yet because I haven't reread this one, but this might be my favorite Stormlight book. Currently, like, the one that has always held my heart and has always been my favorite is the Way of Kings. I know a lot of people's favorite is Words of Radiance, which I like, but it wasn't my favorite. I absolutely loved The Way of Kings, and I've reread that book like 3 or 4 times now. So I don't think it's fair to compare it to Wind and Truth, but some of the storylines that happened in this book were so fun, and seeing some characters have some realizations that have been thousands of pages in the making was, I just, yes, I absolutely loved this. There also was something that was happening at the end that I was kind of mad about, and I was having these thoughts as we were getting closer and closer and closer to the ending, that I wasn't satisfied with something in particular, and I was like, I really wish that this would have happened instead, and I just didn't think that something... I'm being vague because I don't want to give any spoilers away, but there was something with one of the characters that I really wanted them to realize. And at the end, not at the very, very end, but like probably within, I don't know, maybe 50 pages of the ending, I was like, oh, this isn't going to happen, and it's going to end in a way that I just really didn't want. And it took a turn, and it went, and I won't say that I wanted the things that happened at the end to happen, but the realization that happened for this particular character, that is what I wanted. And that was what was in my head as we were going through the storyline. And when I finished the book, I had a thought to myself, like, I just need to trust Sanderson, because I was very disappointed as I was going through that something in particular was going to happen. And when it didn't, and it, you know, went the way that I wanted to, I was like, yeah. So anyway, this is my favorite book of the year. I absolutely love Stormlight Archive, and it's such a massive series. I'm not going to explain to you what's in Wind and Truth because it's the 5th book in this series, but if you haven't heard of Way of Kings, the main character, there are lots of different POVs that you follow, but the main character of the Way of Kings is Kaladin, and you get to follow him from when he is a very young boy to when he is a man. There are flashbacks in time where you get to see how he got to the stage that he's in right now, but in life, there's been things that have happened to him that have forced him into slavery and inevitably into a war that he doesn't really want to be in. And you get to see him kind of be beaten down and what he does with that. There's a massive magical system within Stormlight as well that you learn about, that I'm not going to go into. You have to read it if you want to know. But the characters and the magic system, I guess, are both the shining points of this. I also think with Wind and Truth, because it's so far into the Stormlight, I loved all the tie-ins to the rest of the books in the Cosmere. We are starting to get to the point in Stormlight, if you haven't read some of the other Cosmere, you aren't going to have all of the details that you need. There are other books in Stormlight have little Easter eggs from other books that are just kind of fun details and cool for the people who have picked up those other books, but they're not necessary for the storylines. We have gotten to the point now where if you don't have certain pieces of information, you're not going to understand what's going on with certain aspects of the story. So just be aware of that. But yeah, this is my favorite book. I love it. I don't own it yet because I have the really big floppy paperbacks, and it's only available in hardback right now. So I'm waiting for it to come out to purchase it, but it will definitely be added to my collection next year. So those are my top 10 and one honorable mention. I hope you found something in here that you at least find interesting, or other books that maybe you have loved. Let me know in the comments down below what your best book of the year is. If you aren't feeling chatty, leave me something to indicate the wind. I think there is a wind emoji, but if not, try and find an emoji that like is maybe a little swirls to indicate wind for Wind and Truth. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening and a happy new year, and I will see you in 2025. Bye.